The oil spill was unique in the range of habitats that it affected. The biggest habitat that it affected was also the least known, and that's that deep water column of the Gulf of Mexico. So the oil spill is, a mile deep, and that oil rose up through the water column, and as it did, it went through these deep waters that we call the Deep-Pelagic zone. So these are the dark to twilight zone kind of waters before it hit the surface. So one of the big issues with assessing the damage from the oil spill was that we didn't really know what even lived out there. We didn't have a proper inventory of what could have been affected. So that was a big part of what we have done with DEEPEND, is go out and do a survey, sampling survey using a lot of different methodologies to find out what lives there and then how much. And it's important because a lot of things rely on those deep living things. So even though the average human may not see those things, we actually derive benefits from them. So things that like whales and deep diving dolphins and seabirds, they feed directly on these deep living things. And these deep living things also take carbon basically out of the atmosphere and sequester it deep. So they're an important part of the functioning of the Gulf. And after the spill was really the largest focused study on that environment and how the oil spill may have affected it. One of the biggest highlights is, we tend to think of the open Gulf as being kind of a desert. That's usually how these offshore waters, they're clear blue because there's nothing in it kind of thing. Our view of the deep Gulf is that it's, the big black, that it's mostly dark. So we're just seeing the little skin that's blue. But under that is this amazing diversity of life. So we've identified 897 species of fishes so far. There was only 1,600 known for the whole of the Gulf, and we thought most of the species were shallow. So it turns out that over half of the fish in the Gulf use that offshore water at some point in their lifetime. So that was a big thing. About 180 of those species are new records for the Gulf. So we've increased our book of fishes by more than 10% just from this deep sampling. Well, that really draws people's interest into it. So you really have to get some public buy-in to care about an ecosystem that most people are not familiar with. So the kids, we've got a robust outreach program. We put out these learning modules and curricula for teachers and whatnot. So, you show a kid a glowing squid or a fish with a lure on its head or a jellyfish that lights up if you touch it or whatever. These really capture people's imagination. So that's important for that stakeholder buy-in, that what happens out there is not just a wasteland. It really is something valuable, this really cradle of diversity. So that was one of our biggest things. And the other thing is we've tracked the abundance of fish, squid, and shrimp over time since the oil spill. And what we've seen is a dramatic reduction now. There's just a whole lot less out there now than there was the year after the spill. Now, one of the main things we've discovered is the Gulf is unique in the whole world. So we recently mapped the life of the entire world ocean, and there's 4 places on Earth that are just extremely diverse in the oceanic system, and the Gulf of Mexico is one of those. So one thing we found is that the things that live on the coast and the things that live offshore are fairly well connected. We see a lot of the coastal things offshore. The offshore may serve as kind of a bank, so that if something happens onshore, it can backfill with this kind of reservoir of early life history stages. So that's really was interesting to us to see the connection both deep and shallow, because a lot of this stuff comes up at night and goes back down. So it gives you this impression of this large connected Gulf with that deep part being a really important part of the machine. Well, the biggest thing that we've suffered from before Deepwater Horizon was the lack of pre-spill data. So what would we consider a baseline out there? What's a healthy ecosystem? So we've been trying to catch up by sampling, after the spill up to, we even have another cruise this year. What we really need are samples and monitoring before the drilling activity, such that if something happens, we understand its effect on baselines a lot better. I think that's that's one of our most important lessons here, is that you really need to go out and get your data before something happens. Because drilling's going deeper and deeper and deeper. So we now go by the Deepwater Horizon site on our way out to sample even deeper water. So I hate to say it, but the odds of it happening are increasing. They're not decreasing. So the deeper you go, the more risky it gets. We certainly hope there's not going to be another spill, but at least made a kind of an inventory of what's there. So if something were to happen again, and some people say it's really just a matter of time, we'll be a lot better prepared.